I give the call to the member for Hughes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'd like to commend the member for Macarthur for his speech. To have such an educated medical man give such a convincing and thorough and detailed approval of the work that ANSTO does is truly refreshing, especially when we hear in Parliament some of the nonsense that is peddled by Green members of this Parliament. And I say so as the only member in this Parliament that actually has a nuclear reactor in his electorate. And I say so that with great pride, because at ANSTO they truly do world-leading research work that plays a valuable, important role in the health of all Australians. As my good friend, the member for Macarthur, noted, that on average, every single Australian can expect to have a nuclear medicine procedure that uses radioisotopes for diagnostic or therapeutic purposes at some stage in their life. On average, we will all need those vital, life-saving nuclear medicines that Lucas Heights provides. And yet we have some misguided Greens that sit in this Parliament that want to close it down, Madam Deputy Speaker. What a tragic that we see such misguided, such lack of people that fail to look at the evidence and fail to look at the science. Getting back to the specifics of the bill, the Australian Nuclear Science and Technological Organisation Amendment Bill 2017 will provide Australia's Nuclear Science and Research Agency, known as ANSTO, the flexibility required for successfully establishing an innovation precinct adjacent to Lucas Heights campus in southern Sydney in my electorate of Hughes, and will potentially establish additional precincts in association with other campuses. This is actually fantastic news for my electorate. Having that innovation hub, that innovation precinct next to ANSTO will enable hundreds, if not thousands, of high-paying research jobs in the southern part of Sydney in the electorate of Hughes. And I am very, very excited about the future for nuclear medicine and the work in ANSTO that we have in the future. We know that it's 1/3 of all procedures in modern hospitals involve radiation or radioactivity. The science tells us that these procedures are safe, effective, and don't require anaesthetic. And they are useful for a broad spectrum of medical specialties, from paediatrics, which I note the member for Macarthur was very much involved and has great expertise, to cardiology and psychiatry. This is something that we should be proud of as a nation. And in fact, going forward, we note that one of Canada's large nuclear facilities is closing down. And this will enable Lucas Heights to actually increase their isotope productions from about 550,000 a year to around 10 million. A quarter of the world's demand will come out of the ANSTO reactor at Lucas Heights in my electorate, something that I am immensely proud of. And everyone that is involved in ANSTO should also be immensely proud of. And the mistake that we hear, or the concerns that we've had over the years, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that we simply haven't had the technology in nuclear research that we should have, despite the great work that ANSTO are going. Australia, with our deposits of uranium, should have been one of the global leaders in nuclear technology across the board. But the sad thing was that when we actually constructed the new Opal reactor at Lucas Heights, the country that had the technology to build it for us were the Argentinians. In fact, we didn't have the technology or the scientists here in Australia, and we had to go to Argentina in South America to get that technology that we needed. The result of that was because of the misguided scare campaigns we had against the nuclear industry in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s that prevented the development of a nuclear industry in Australia. And with that, Madam Deputy Speaker, it was very interesting to read today's Australian. It had a very interesting article talking about nuclear power and the future for nuclear power. And this was written by a gentleman called Michael Schellenberger. And he was actually a former renewables advocate to Barack Obama, an advisor to Barack Obama. He was someone that was actually awarded the Time magazine Hero of the Environment in 2008. And he said, like most people, I started out pretty anti-nuclear. I changed my mind as I realised you can't power a modern economy on solar and wind. He said, wind and solar are only useful for leveraging the fossil fuel mix. They have to be backed up, but they are doubling the cost of electricity, and they, talking about solar and wind, actually have a big environmental impacts. He said all existing renewable technologies do is make the electricity system chaotic and provide a greenwash for fossil fuels. Chaotic. He went on and he said, opposition to nuclear was like a superstitious religious belief. And he said, in what other area does the science say one thing so clearly, but a vocal group, referring to the Greens, refuses to accept the evidence? And that is where we are. He concluded, nuclear is the only technology that can lift everyone out of poverty and reverse the human impact. But yet, Madam Deputy Speaker, we, for some unknown reason, or it's not an unknown reason, for unknown illogically reason, simply have banned the development of nuclear power in this country. If we are going to be serious about reducing carbon dioxide emissions, you simply cannot run, as Mr. Schellenberg notes, you cannot run a modern economy on solar and wind. And this is the mistaken ideology that we've had behind the renewable energy target. I think we're now starting to see the results of that policy. And I think by the time of this century is written and someone sits down to look at all the policy decisions that have been made throughout this entire century, they will say one of the greatest mistaken policies that this nation ever went down the track of was Kevin Rudd's renewable energy target. It has caused absolute chaos in our electricity market. It has been the main thing that has been responsible for lifting the price of electricity in this nation, taking what was once our nation's greatest competitive advantage, our greatest competitive advantage, that of low-cost energy, and turning it into a competitive disadvantage. That is what it has done. And as the member says, I'm getting back to the bill, because this bill talks about Lucas Heights and the work that they are doing in nuclear science. And we, in the future, Madam Deputy Speaker, this innovation hub will lead us to greater understanding of nuclear technology. But the reason that we are actually behind at the moment, in many aspects, and as I said, while we had to go to Argentina to get the Opal reactor built at Lucas Heights, is because of our misunderstanding of nuclear power. Madam Deputy Speaker, we have seen, as I said, the mess that the renewable energy target has had. We have seen, if you want a practical example of the failure, just go and look at what has happened in South Australia. Here is a place that now has the proud title of the highest electricity prices anywhere in the world. It takes a special level of incompetence to go down the track and impose policies upon your state that gives them the highest electricity prices in the world. But yet that is what the Labor government has done in South Australia. And you would think that if you had the highest electricity prices in the world, they would at least be reliable. But they've managed not only to give themselves the highest electricity prices in the world, they've managed to give themselves the most unreliable electricity in this nation. We've seen blackouts last Christmas. We've seen the Australian Energy Market Operator estimate that this summer in South Australia, there's a 30% chance of further blackouts. And we've seen the stunt that they pulled, the publicity stunt of the world's biggest battery. The idea that this can somehow solve it. Look at the numbers of that farce, complete and utter publicity stunt. It will produce 129 megawatt hours of electricity. 129. And what does South Australia need in electricity on a hot day in megawatt hours? They need close to 50,000. So this idea that you can somehow have batteries to back things up is an absolute farce. Just look at the numbers. It will produce 129 megawatt hours out of a daily need of 50,000. And for that, it's north of $100 million, and we don't even know what the cost is. And then they have to back that up again with 200 megawatts of diesel generators, again at a cost to the taxpayer of over $100 million, that will burn through 80,000 litres of diesel fuel in an hour. If you want to generate electricity in the most dirty way that you can possibly can, you can't do it probably worse than diesel generators that rip through 80,000 litres. But that is what South Australia are doing. Now, you would think holding that up, everyone would see what an absolute debacle that is. No one in their right mind would copy South Australia. We would thank them for the experiment that they did, the grand experiment they inflicted upon their people, and we'd say thank you, because we have learnt what not to do. That is what common sense and logic would happen. But instead, we see Labor in Victoria saying, we want to copy South Australia. We'll copy South Australia. We'll go down the South Australian track like lemmings off the cliff, and we'll copy South Australia's policies. And what has the Australian Energy Market Regulator said of now the mess that they have? Now they have chased Hazelwood out of town. So when they chased Hazelwood out of town, they tripled the coal royalties. When Labor in Victoria came to power, they said it was their policy to get Hazelwood to close down, tripled the coal royalties, chase them out as quickly as they can. And what's going to be the result? The Australian Energy Market Regulator has estimated that this summer, the state of Victoria faces a 40% chance of blackouts. Not only have they accelerated electricity prices, made them unaffordable to many, but they've given the state a 40% chance of blackouts. Now you would think, common sense, logic, everything that we've been taught, as you look at the examples and you see, we look at the example of South Australia and we go, what an economic disaster. That's not what you do. And you see Victoria, another lemming over the cliff. You see, you cannot go down the path of 50% renewable energy target. But yet, in this federal parliament, we have the alternate government, the opposition, want to do exactly that. They want to copy Victoria, they want to copy South Australia, and they want to bring on a 50% renewable energy target in this nation. This is a recipe for the complete economic destruction and deindustrialisation of our society. And yet they stand in Parliament and they complain. We hear the Labor, they complain how sad they are about the cost of electricity, and yet they have such a completely illogical and incoherent policy that they are copying, because they want to appeal to those green inner city basket weavers for votes and sell out regional areas, sell out the working people of Australia, selling out the mums and dads and the pensioners will have to pay for in their pursuit of green votes. That's what this Parliament has descended into, Madam Deputy Speaker, where we see that policy from the Labor Party. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, if we are going forward, we should have to look at what are the options, what is a nuclear option for our electricity generation fleet. There is great research in this area currently being undertaken. There is development in small nuclear modular reactors of 20 and 50 megawatts that are being developed. There's still several years down the track, Madam Deputy Speaker, but we should have an option in this country. We should keep all options on the table. We should take advantage of new technology as it comes along, not to artificially force-feed higher cost electricity options into the market because it will win green votes in the inner city. Madam Deputy Speaker, I am very proud of the work that ANSTO does. This will enable them to continue with their great work. It will bring many more jobs, highly paid jobs to my electorate, and I commend this bill to the House.